Jim Buckley of the Montecito Journal.
Well, I am a Vietnam-era vet. I was in the Navy, and in fact I was on the USS Henry W. Tucker that replaced either the Maddox or the Turner Joy in the Gulf of Tonkin incident way back in 1964. So Vietnam, even though I didn't actually go on shore, that whole era and the whole conflict is a big part of my early days.
To come here, Erin, any day of the week.
Okay.
Any day of the week.
And you are?
I'm Diana Starline.
It's the 40th anniversary of the fall of Saigon, which ended the long battle of Vietnam, basically lasting about 20 years when you go into the French period. And of course, the American involvement centered around maybe one or two aspects of looking at Vietnam. One was, we are there to fight the evil, godless communists and the domino theory, because we saw communism taking over Red China, North Korea, North Vietnam. They were all over Laos, Cambodia, Thailand, and throughout the Asian area. And we should join in our mutual ally against a mutual enemy, and that's why we're there. We're fighting communism, bad communism. But I'm still thinking, am I the only person in the United States that's wondering, why are these people leaving in such horrible conditions? What's happening in Vietnam to make them leave? Well, I left that question alone until a couple of years ago, I started writing a book about a refugee from South Vietnam, from Saigon. She was an amazing woman, very young, very successful, business-wise. She had a lot of money. She had all the means to be able to leave when the communists came in, and she didn't. So this is kind of a different story. And the reason for that was, like some of the other Vietnamese at that time, they felt that things might not be so bad under the communists. They were willing to share. Anyway, for a lot of reasons I won't take to go into right now, she decided to stay behind. So this is a little bit different story. She's expecting things are going to be different, and what changed her mind is what she told me. She started telling me stories about how things were living day to day under the communists. I didn't have any reason to suspect that she wasn't telling me the truth, but as a researcher and a historian, I have to check and see, are her experiences exaggerated perhaps under the trauma of leaving? Or perhaps were these stories true, but they were only true for a particular, maybe specific time, or more specifically, a particular place in Vietnam? Were these widespread? This led me to say, let me go look up and see, read some books about what happened in Vietnam. And there aren't any. So there's about 3,000 books that have been written on Vietnam. Most of those, probably 80-85%, having to do with the war. Another portion of those having to do with cross-cultural experiences, American, Asian to America. And there's some books from the boat people and some governmental reports. Basically, anything I could get my hands on, I did. Anything that were first-hand accounts and experiences. And from that, I began to pull information, creating my own indexes, and from that, organizing and categorizing all that information into a body of work that will be in the center of this book. That is how we got to how we are today and what we're talking about. And so fasten your seatbelts, it's going to be a bumpy ride. So April 29th, 1975, the North Vietnamese troops plow all the way into Saigon. The next morning, it's dead quiet. It's dead quiet. People expected that the fight in Saigon would have taken weeks, months, and both sides were prepared to take up to a year and a half, perhaps even 2 years, thinking this was going to be house-to-house fighting. But instead, it was basically over in a matter of hours, one day, and they were inside Saigon. What happened right away is the Bo Dois. These are the soldiers from North Vietnam, and they're mostly very young men, some of them only teenagers. They're going around in jeeps with their loudspeakers saying, "We have liberated Saigon. We have liberated Saigon. You are now part of the People's Party. All of your goods now belong to the party. All of your goods and your land belong to the people." Over and over, this is what they've gotten first thing in the morning. Now what happens right away, this is not in this order that I'm giving it to you. It's just to give you these things taking place in just within weeks and right away. First, food is collected. All the food is collected, and to get your food, you're going to have to go to a central distribution point. Next, the banks are shuttered. They're closed. Most of the businesses are closed right away for the first couple of days until you can sort things out. The communists obviously can't pick up everything in one day, but for a lot of the big stores, especially food, that's all gone, collected. People's homes are regularly searched and interrogated. And when they came in, the policy that they had was you were to look at the Bodoys, these soldiers, as like the people's children. And little children can come running in and out of your house without knocking on the door. They are like children. Therefore, you could not lock your doors, and the soldiers could come in at any time, including night. Most of the time, they came in to interrogate people at night, and they wouldn't do it conveniently after dinner at 7:30. They'd come in 10, 10:30, 11 o'clock, midnight, 1:30, 2 o'clock, bang and bang and bang on your gates if you had a finer home, until you finally opened up and let them come in. When they came in, they searched your home for anything and everything that looked Western, that looked like anything that could be incriminating, and believe me, anything could be incriminating. Even if you had nothing to do with politics, you had nothing to do with the war, anything that smacked of doing business with the Americans, of even enjoying anything of Western culture, would be confiscated and you would be questioned. They separated the families when they came in. Children will be put on. Sometimes these homes are several stories, especially, I guess I'm referencing the city here. Cities would be several stories, small, maybe sort of like the Neil Ablett house, where they're small, but there's several floors. So the children are put on one floor, the wife on another floor, the father on another floor. They're asked the same questions over and over again. You have beautiful artwork. Where is this artwork from? How did you afford this artwork? Where did you get your money to do this? Well, obviously, children don't even know what to say. And as you husbands and wives know, sometimes the wife knows, the husband can't remember, he remembers it wrong. If those answers don't all line up, you're in big trouble. The parents, of course, are frightened out of their gourds because they don't know what's happening to their children. They've been separated from their children. The men, right away, anybody who was in the army were asked to report in to go to re-education camp. The communists knew that the Western world would be looking to see if there was going to be a bloodbath. So they didn't have any bloodbath in the street. If they saw any insurgents, they would shoot them at the spot and just leave them in the streets. However, they didn't do a big massacre in public. So every single thing, a matter of life, was controlled by the communists, every aspect. And this hierarchy of going into these neighborhood wards or fwangs was particularly disruptive. You might think, well, look, I'm going to play it cool, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to just kind of go along with everything, keep myself under the radar. I'm not going to get political. I'll just kind of say the minimum possible. That is not possible. This was total mind control, so that when you were meeting with your group, you had to be enthusiastic. You had to show enthusiastic approval of socialism. And because everything is controlled by the communism, you need information on other people, or other people may have information about you. So they have to make sure that you confess something, or they will make up something about you in order to incur favor so that they might get another cup of rice or whatever at the distribution. So right away, these actions have the result of controlling people. As you know, the old adage, the way to a man's heart is through his stomach, but the way to control an entire population is through their stomach. So you can get people to do almost anything when they are absolutely at the brink of starvation. Second of all, because the banks were closed and because the communists were coming into their homes and seizing all their really expensive, any of the goods that they could see, you had no money or no resources to do anything else for yourself, no other alternative. And finally, of course, who can you trust? Because when you are in these groups and everybody needs something to get ahead, You don't know when your best friend may have to turn on you because somebody else has something on him, and it may not even be something important. It's just something that's hyped up for purposes of basically control and gain. So this picture that I'm presenting gives us to another point, which is that there was a great deal of resentment, especially by the North. They were told repeatedly for the whole time they've been living under communism that the South is in dire states, that if any of the pictures that you see of people looking well and doing well in the South, that's because they were part of that puppet government, they were under the Americans, but the rest of the population is completely despairing, poverty, have nothing. They're waiting with open arms for the liberation. So the Northerners come down, they're not appreciated, they're not welcome, they're treated with suspicion and fear and maybe even hostility. So this is a surprise to them when they get there and to be treated that way. But more importantly, this resentment and this anger, I think, is a key to understanding of what takes place the rest of this time in South Vietnam. Because they've been told, these are young soldiers coming through, teens, their 20s, and they've been told repeatedly how miserable, how impoverished they are. And you can imagine they come down south, they get to Saigon, pick any of the big cities down there, and what they find is absolutely nothing like what they've been told. These are fairy tale cities. They're just basically a veritable wonderland of progress, of plenty. They're beautiful, rich cities. They're superior in every single kind of way that you can imagine, medicine, technology, cultural. They're full of food. And the NVA, the North Vietnamese Bodois, they've been living impoverished themselves in the jungles. It's surprising what drives them for so long. Some of the other areas of control that were so horrible, in the culture itself, you didn't want to stick out. This is talking about the Vietnamese. You don't want to look like you had anything to do with the West. So ladies stopped wearing nail polish. Actually, they'd be attacked on buses, and the Bodois would cut their fingernails off because that shows that you're very la-di-da. Jewelry, of course, out. Western clothes out. You wouldn't even wear the traditional ao dai, the beautiful dress that's native to the Vietnamese. Instead, you'd be wearing the very ugly peasant, the baba, the pajama dresses, the pajamas. You had to do everything to hide your wealth. By the way, when people were so hungry, anybody, and veterans remember the zoo in Saigon? Anybody remember the Saigon Zoo? Anybody there? People were so hungry that basically the animals in the zoo disappeared. They became mealtime. The tamarind trees in downtown Saigon were stripped because people needed that for fuel. Because there was no protein there, people were grabbing lizards, roasting crickets, anything at all. The children's skin was turning green because of lack of protein. And then when it came to voting there or for the rest of the area, you have to vote in order to get your ration card. You must vote with a cadre watching you the whole time. And best of all, you have only one person to vote for. By the way, back to the NEZ or any of the agriculture places, if you have something to grow, the government taxes you at pretty much 90 to 100%. So what people tried to do was to sneak and bring some fruit or food into their homes, sell it on the black market. I think at the end of our time, and so I will just kind of wrap to here and to say to really my veterans, in the outcome of all of this, you always wondered, the war wasn't of your choosing, and maybe the way it was strategized wasn't the way that you're choosing, but a lot of that can be assimilated perhaps if you felt that what you did made a difference. And I think the information that I'm bringing about is information that hasn't been heard. This is the rest of the story. And to say, did you have something worth fighting for? I think yes.